Hi, I'm Nick Hague, and I'm the host of the World's Greatest Business Thinkers podcast. And today I'm with Paul Hague, and we're going to be talking about innovation frameworks. It's said that new is the most important word in the marketing vocabulary. People are fascinated by things that are new and eager to buy them. Am I right in thinking that it's argued that a high proportion of a company's product range should be stacked with new products?
Well, this word new is certainly very powerful, and it's used quite liberally in markets. So you see it plastered on the packaging or on products, and you wonder to what extent it is new. Very often it's old wine in new bottles, or it's a slight modification to a product. So a very liberal interpretation is taken of this word new. So people know that new does sell, and they might make these small changes, and as a result claim that a significant proportion of the products in the lineup are new. You and I might question to what extent they are new rather than just slight modifications to existing products. But if you're in a certain industry group, if you're in new tech, if you're in new technology, the chances are that something like 30 to 50% of your product lineup is less than 2, 3, 4 years old. It has to be, because technology changes so quickly. If you're a manufacturer of steel rod for reinforcing concrete, the likelihood is that your product range hasn't changed a great deal over time. However, although we're talking about new products, we're also talking about innovation. And a company making steel rod for reinforcing concrete might introduce innovative ways of dealing with their customers. So there might be technical questions that could be answered online by AI. A company that has traditionally sold through wholesalers might decide to also sell direct. So you can innovate by finding different ways of serving your customers, and that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about innovation frameworks, not just new products.
Yeah. On my podcast, the World's Greatest Business Thinkers podcast, I spoke with Rita McGrath, and one of her many books is called The End of Competitive Advantage, and she talks in that about companies falling into the trap of obsessing over defending existing advantage that they have over the competition rather than always thinking about the future. They obsess over defense rather than thinking about the future and building innovation as a core pillar in their world. So she uses an example in that about Skype and how it disrupted the telecommunications industry, and because traditional telecom operators failed to believe that free could be a viable business model, they were viewing Skype through their particular lens of their own business model. So it's important always to think of moving the needle, doing things differently. But I know launching and marketing new products, it sounds very seductive, and it's important to build this in, as we've just described, for company survival. But what are the dangers around the subject of innovation?
Well, it's expensive. In order to launch new products, it costs you a good deal. It's you're distracted from selling your existing portfolio, and you're focusing on some new products or some new way of serving customers, and you can't really afford failures. And yet we believe that, or we think that there are a high failure rate of new products. This is debatable. I've heard it said, I think Clayton Christensen said that 95% of new products fail. I'm sure it's not that high a figure. Certainly 95% of new ideas might fail, and we'll come to that in a minute. But if you've gone to the trouble of launching a product, you hopefully have given it the best chance possible with some good marketing, and you've tested the market beforehand, and you've launched the product, and you're monitoring, and it's going to go okay, you hope. I think that possibly the figure is closer to 30% that fail rather than 95%. And it might be due to, those that do fail might be due to poor marketing, or somebody might have had, people get obsessed with an invention that they've made and believe that the rest of the world's going to love that invention when actually there's not a high demand for it.
Yeah.
I remember quite some years ago somebody saying to me they had a new invention. They'd been on holiday to the continent, where they'd seen on the breakfast table small mini waste bins where people would put the debris from the breakfast, the stuff that was left, and they said, this is an innovation that's going to be perfect for the UK market. We want to sell this into the UK. And we could have taken the money off them and done the research, but actually in discussion, we said, well, maybe the UK market, people don't sit down at breakfast and sort of put a bin on the table. And even in a cafe or a restaurant or a hotel, they don't particularly want to have that swing bin on the table. And we didn't go ahead and look at that. But that would have been a good example of somebody trying to launch a product just because they thought it was a good idea and maybe it wasn't.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and to that point, the starting point of all innovation, I think, is you really have to think in the customer's shoes and ask yourself, what's the job the customer is trying to get done? Don't go on that whim of, that you think it might be a good idea. And obviously that's where market research, getting some quantitative data behind that, or even qualitative to understand the customer. But yeah, otherwise, then there's that big risk of, as you say, money, loss of time, maybe reputation and image, and that loss of potential. So,
Nick, just focus on that very, very important phrase that you use there. There's a job to be done. We often think that we're in the business of selling products. Well, we are in the business of selling products or services. That's what we make. That's our offer. But the people who buy them usually want a job to be done. I mean, if you're buying food, you want it to sustain you and fill you up, and that's the job to be done. If you're buying a tool, you buy the tool, but it's in order to drill a hole in a wall. Or you buy a car, and it's for lots of things, but it's to get you from A to B. So everything that we buy is for a job to be done. And when we're thinking of innovation, that's what we should have in our minds. What is this job that the customer or potential customer needs to be done? And can it be done better? Can we make a product or modify our offer so it can better meet these needs in terms of getting the job done?
Okay, well, let's imagine, therefore, that we're responsible for new product development within our company. What framework should be our starting point?
Okay, so the first thing to do, I think, is to look at any suggestions coming from customers. If a customer has suggested that this product could be improved in some way, or they come to you with ideas, listen to them. The customer's got to be a great source of innovative ideas. However, the customer doesn't always know what is technically possible. So if somebody came to me and said, how could this car be improved? And I said, well, I'd like it to have no costs of fuel. I don't want to pay for fuel. I mean, it technically isn't feasible. So the manufacturers of cars know that that's not feasible. So in the main, most of our ideas come from within the company. And within the company, it should be from everybody within the company, not just the research and development people, not just the technical people, but it should be them, of course, the production people, yes, the marketing people, definitely, maybe the finance people should be involved. So a wide range of different people within the organisation should come together and brainstorm to think, what are the ideas, idea generation for innovation? How could we better serve the needs of customers? And in those brainstorming sessions, which might go on over, we're not talking about an hour here, we're talking about a day, and it could be longer than that. So we get as many ideas, crazy they may be, but that doesn't matter. We get loads and loads of ideas. That's the first step in the framework, brainstorming. And then we might have 100 ideas that are reduced to 12. Because together in the brainstorming session, we could say, well, what actually is feasible? Could we make it? Could we make it at a profit? Is it likely to meet needs better than anything else that's on the market? And so you can quickly filter out some of the crazy ideas, which were good to hear, but that you're not going to go forward with. So you get a dozen or so that you do go forward with. And then you produce a concept for those dozen or so ideas. So this is the concept. This is how it would look. And you can take that concept to potential customers. and say, we have in mind this innovation, how would you rate it? I mean, it's not unlike doing a conjoint study where you would say, these are the elements of what we're offering you, and this is the price. How likely would you be to buy it? So you create a concept there, put it in front of people, but of course at this stage it's theoretical. If it comes back positive, so you have stage gates that it goes through. If it goes through the gate and it comes back positive, you would say, let's write a business case for these concepts that have gone through the gate. And the business case would look at, if you get down to detail about how we would produce it, how much money we would make out of it, who we would send it, how we would sell it to, and so on. So that's the business case. You would move into making prototypes, if you can make prototypes, so that you've moved from a theoretical idea to something that a customer can look at, pick up, and say whether they think it's a good idea or not. So those prototypes are again shown to customers and potential customers and get a rating. Do they think they're okay? You and I have done loads and loads of research in the disposable glove market, where the glove manufacturers would make prototypes. We would then give it to people to test those gloves and then ask them what they thought of the gloves. And of course, making a prototype is a bit different to making mass volumes of things. So you have to assume that the technology and the production guys can turn the prototype into a real product. But then it goes into product launch and monitored to make sure that the new launch is actually delivering, a bit like the Dagmar thing you were talking when we were talking promotions on an earlier sort of tutorial there, Nick, where we were saying you've got to define and measure what you want to achieve. Yeah. And that's what we're doing at this stage. We've launched the products, we've defined what our objectives are, and we're measuring the success.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, again, going back to it, understanding what the customer really wants is so important. You can do all the brainstorming internally, but, you do need to sense check that with your outside marketplace, because, again, going back on another example from our history, when it was UK's largest rental organisation to the construction market, and they thought they got an excellent idea where it was wraparound services to build loyalty, a loyalty scheme to help people keep coming back for more. And they brainstormed it, and they'd not tested it with their outside marketplace, and they'd gone to market. They'd sunk over £1 million in advertising and promotions. And I remember one of the senior marketing execs there, having that conversation with me, that they'd only got a handful of people that had signed up in the whole of the UK. And so we went with focus groups to test this scenario. And so it fell down. They weren't interested because they had the contacts. They could, whether it was to do with car rental hire and things like that, or whether it was not associated with this brand of hire company. So it's so important to build that customer research in and those stage gates when you're taking something to market.
We started by saying there are a lot of failures in innovation and new product, and whether it's 95% or 30%, it doesn't matter, because it's a very expensive job, is innovation. And research is absolutely critical. So there might be some upfront cost in doing the research, but if you do the research and you take it through the stage gates, only allowing it to go to another gate if it passes through the previous stage gates, you have a very good chance that your innovation will be successful.
Yeah. So we've talked about those frameworks, and of course there's many more. We haven't even talked about Roger's diffusion of innovation. Once you've got your product to market, there's a product life cycle from pre-birth through to old age, in terms of knowing where you are on that curve. Just another one to mention before we close up. I really like the McKinsey 3 Horizons of innovation, especially because I think it shows that there's different stage of investment needed for new products within a company. And I'm falling back on another podcast from the World's Greatest Business Thinkers podcast that I host. Scott Anthony, he talked about the fact that, in terms of innovation, we might view startups as being the biggest innovators because that's the stories we hear where they disrupt a market. But actually, the biggest innovators are sometimes the corporates, or often the corporates, because they've got the capabilities, the resources to work on innovation across these 3 horizons, from your core business through to extending that core business through to then working on totally new business opportunities. So I think, these frameworks can help us, and we need to be thinking about innovating. And it's not always about doing something totally new. It can be about that extension of your existing business in most examples. So I think from today's discussion, we've talked about many different frameworks there, haven't we? So there's lots more to have a look at. How many frameworks do we have in total on innovation?
Well, we have a lot. We have 30 or 40, and the reason is because there are, in marketing, the frameworks often embrace a lot of different things. So you talked about Rogers diffusion. So we might talk about that in terms of launching new products, but also in terms of promotion and marketing. So how do you get to the innovators and the early adopters? And so go to b2bframeworks.com, have a look at that. There's 20, 30 40 different frameworks there that could be useful. And your Three Horizons one, Nick, I mean, it's a reminder to me that with there's an old saying, isn't there? Was it if you write a better book, preach a better sermon, or make a better mousetrap, the world will beat a path to your door. The sort of view being that if you've got a good product, that's all you need to do, and it will be successful. It's so wrong. There must be lots of good mousetraps and books and preachers and so on that just don't get sold because the supply chain needs to be in place. The promotion has to be right. It's no good having a brilliant mousetrap that no one's ever heard of. So I think to get all those different elements into innovation is important. So when you're looking at those frameworks, don't forget those that will help you get your product to market.
Yeah. And I think have that long-term perspective. It's you need to have a bit of an appetite for risk, have an entrepreneurial mindset, of course, but some of these frameworks will help position your mind around how to take that to market. So I'm sure they'll be useful, so go and check them out. Thanks for today's discussion, Paul.
Thanks, Nick.